Scenes like this are certainly familiar to you. These are the well-known sales that occur in supermarkets when product prices are reduced by more than half, leading a whole throng to jostle for at least one item. The odd thing is that a similar incident occurs in a book written by a well-known author from the previous century. The following is what he writes. The line that I have cited is taken from George Orwell's 1949 novel, 1984. Despite being dystopian fiction, which depicts a future in which people live under severe oppression, a lot of the material is based on the political reality of many countries, both past and current. This passage from the book perfectly captures what occurs when people are engrossed in collective behavior. All instincts and primitivism are let loose as though it were a struggle for existence. When soccer fans fight, something similar occurs. An immediate us-against-them mentality takes over, and everyone spotted sporting the shirt of the rival side is viewed as an enemy, while anyone wearing the shirt of the same team is viewed as a friend. It is extremely difficult for people to regain their individual consciousness of free will after they have been taken over by this collective state, leaving them vulnerable to manipulation by others who say what they want to hear. The collective can become a central doctrine for various ideologies, such as collectivism, in which the goals of a particular collective, such as a state, a nation, a socio-economic class, an ethnic group, or a society, take precedence over the goals of individuals. However, this collective spirit has a positive aspect when it comes to group formation and a sense of belonging, preventing the individual from frequently falling into a deep abyss caused by their own destructive thoughts and tendency. These collectivist ideologies include fascism and communism. George Orwell thought that the rise of totalitarianism, a political system in which a centralized state apparatus tries to control every aspect of people's lives, was largely due to the widespread adoption of a collectivist mentality. All of the 20th century totalitarian nations were structured around some sort of collectivist ideology. In China and the Soviet Union, for instance, it was fascism. In Italy, it was fascism. And in Germany, there was that regime I can't name, but you already know what it is. This is because a tyrant's ability to exploit the low level of individual consciousness that a population as a whole maintains when it is subjugated by herd behavior is one of the things that leads to his ascent to power. Once people have become like sheep, waiting for their shepherd to lead them, he can easily manipulate their emotions and instill fear in order to instill obedience. In a propaganda blitz, the public is presented with evidence, whether authentic or fake, of a heinous crime of national or worldwide significance, or of a catastrophe that has the potential to seriously harm society by all branches of the mainstream media. A self-perpetuating collective hysteria may be sparked by the media's dramatic and convincing depiction of the event or crisis. The initial reports may encourage people to post their rash, fear-based reactions on social media, which will only feed the frenzy and exacerbate the atmosphere of fear. And that's the main theme of George Orwell's 1984, using terror and continual citizen monitoring to control a whole country. However, we must comprehend how the society in the novel was split in order to comprehend how people were brainwashed into fervently believing in a despotic tyrant. Well, the world's nations were split up into 3 superpowers following a nuclear war. Oceania, which comprises the Americas, Australia, England, and a portion of southern Africa, was the first. Eurasia, which comprises the northern portion of the European and Asian continents, is the other superpower. East Asia, which comprises China and its neighboring countries, came last. Nobody is certain whether or not these 3 superpowers are indeed at war all the time. The government of every country declares war in order to keep the populace fearful and to divert factory-produced goods from the market and send them to the front lines of conflict. This deprives the populace of resources because the goods are not being sold. keeping everyone in poverty or stagnant in their income. States convince the populace that they require state protection by using the justification of spending on border security. The novel takes place in Oceania, a country that is divided into 3 castes. Big Brother, the tyrant in charge of these castes, is omnipotent and omniscient. He's at the top of the pyramid, but no one has ever seen him. Instead, he is merely a voice on the radio and a face on the banners.
Big Brother's role is to serve as a focal point for fear and irreverence, which are feelings that a herd can more readily control. In reality, Big Brother is Orwell's indictment of Joseph Stalin, the Soviet tyrant who was viewed as all-powerful by the ruled. The heart of the party, which sits just below Big Brother on the pyramid, is solely in charge of upholding and extending authority by instilling terror.
I'll discuss the base of the pyramid first, followed by the center to keep the explanation on track. The population as a whole, or the masses, are at the base of the pyramid. However, the totalitarian state, which is referred to in the book as the party, does not monitor or control the masses because they control themselves. They work more than 16 hours a day to try to survive, which leaves them with little time to think or even to be aware of the major issue. Instead, they limit themselves to their local circumstances, worrying only about how they will survive until the end of the month. They self-destruct through gambling, prostitution, drinking, and lottery in an attempt to numb their pain and detach themselves from reality because they are unable to comprehend that the world may be different from what it is. However, the party is aware that the masses would only become violent if the development of industrial technology necessitated that they acquire more instruction and better education. In order to avoid this, book sales and education are either ignored or redirected to border spending. I realize it's sad, but isn't any similarity to our world just a coincidence? Now, immediately below the party's core, in the center of the pyramid outlined in the book, lies what George Orwell refers to as the outer party. The outer party is continuously monitored, since, in contrast to the general populace, they have the ability to take over. Scientists, journalists, civil servants, artists, bureaucrats, sociologists, educators, and politicians often make up this class. According to the party, the will to power and the growth of political cynicism are the true threats it faces from this class, the outer party. To put it another way, this class's issue is similarly educational, but they have actual resources to undermine the pyramid's top. This intermediate portion of the pyramid is constantly manipulated to think and act in ways that the party at the top of the pyramid wants them to in order to stop this from happening. Criticizing those who act or believe differently from the party is one way to manipulate them. Friends may criticize their friends, kids can criticize their parents, and so on. An individual may be criticized if a written statement or gesture is interpreted as disrespectful or goes against the party's wishes. Whether you like it or not, George Orwell foresaw more than 50 years ago the exclusion that so many individuals face online today for allegedly speaking or thinking anything that goes against the guidelines in the Thought Patrol guidebook on social media. The most intriguing aspect of the novel, however, is that a thought patrol, known as the Ideas Police, actually exists. It is specifically in charge of monitoring residents' every action, even when they believe they are by themselves. The patrol keeps a close eye on everything, even hobbies and facial expressions. This reminds me a lot of modern cell phones that can listen in on our chats or even access our data. Or when all you can recall is telling your friend that you wanted to buy a new pair of sneakers. How do you think a shoe advertisement would show up on your timeline? Crime Interruption is a training program that is taught to individuals from a young age and is another example of literary manipulation in the book. The youngsters in the novel are conditioned to feel bored or irritated if a series of arguments can be steered in a path that is at odds with the party's beliefs. They are also taught to disrupt critical thinking in school.
are incapable of understanding analogies, and cannot use logical reasoning. Stated differently, crime interruption is, of course, a form of party protective ignorance. When a person's thoughts are about to arise, they are immediately interrupted, either by rejecting them or by an emotional outburst. However, the most common manipulation employed by the party is known as duple thinking, which is the simultaneous conviction in two opposing ideas. It operates as follows. The outer party, which is the class of the pyramid, is also in charge of changing all material that goes against the party's wishes and turning it to their advantage. This includes books, newspapers, records, and news articles. Because he manipulates the information himself, the party intellectual is aware that it is being manipulated, but he also persuades himself that reality is not being violated because of the exercise of duple thinking. Consciously, duple thinking functions. You wouldn't be aware that you were falsifying facts otherwise. Duple thinking, however, also functions subconsciously, since, if it did not, it would induce a sense of deception and shame. For example, when someone looks at the grass, they notice that it is green, but they are compelled to imagine that it is blue, which leads them to assume that the grass is actually blue. They do this without realizing that they are contradicting themselves. Does it contradict itself? Indeed, but that's the goal. The terminologies used in the book appear to be a blend of two or more words. Have you noticed that? Duple thought, criticism, and interruption are because they are, and they are a component of the party's ongoing manipulation, this time through language. The novel teaches society to write and communicate in a brand new language known as New Speech. It was created by combining different terms, frequently in opposition to one another, with the specific goal of limiting people's thinking and preventing them from expressing themselves more clearly. This reduction in word would abbreviate reality and stop what the book refers to as thought crime. Another word has been reduced. These are ideas that contradict the party's tenets. Therefore, thought crime would be impossible, and no one would know how to criticize the party if individuals had less words to communicate their complaints and sentiments. One crucial information alone. As in Adolf Huxley's Brave New World and George Orwell's dystopia, the state prohibited people from reading works by writers like Shakespeare, who added over 1,500 words to the English language, making it easier for individuals to express their thoughts and emotions. Why do these dystopias constantly include Shakespeare? In any case, as has been clearly demonstrated, the foundation of authoritarian ideology is falsehoods, hypocrisies, and contradiction. The captivity of the person is presented by the totalitarian regime as their emancipation. Information censorship is referred to as protecting the truth. Development is the destruction of the economy or culture. It is claimed that the military takeover of other nations is a step toward freedom and peace. The so-called Ministry of Peace in 1984 is actually responsible for starting conflicts. The Ministry of Truth, which manipulates information and produces propaganda. Additionally, there is the Ministry of Abundance, which makes things scarce. The words, war is peace, freedom is slavery, and ignorance is strength, are written on the outside of the Ministry of Truth, which is the subject of the novel. This only makes sense because of the New Speech and the decades-long process of doublethink that the populace has experienced. As if all of these manipulative techniques weren't enough, the party also promotes an event dubbed Hate Week. Even though the public is unaware of whether the countries are actually at war, stands, screens, and banners with images of the adversaries are erected across the cities at this time to allow people to express their rage and use profanity. Whether people like it or not, this makes them more devoted to the party since it makes them perceive everything that opposes it as hostile or an adversary. I don't even have to draw a comparison between this and the state of affairs now. However,
In terms of information manipulation, file burning, and censorship in general, the book makes use of a number of incidents that happened in the Soviet Union and the United Kingdom. For instance, the lectures that the Soviet Union's Stalinist government provided to employees during their breaks served as the inspiration for this hate week. The Soviet press and English words from World War II also served as inspiration for the new lingo, which immersed the men in the full experience of battle. Given that Orwell was an outspoken opponent of capitalism and a fervent socialist, his perspective on the relationship between collectivism and totalitarianism is a little unexpected. He hoped that democratic socialism will develop in the West following its breakup. However, the issue Orwell faced was the dearth of historical or contemporary instances of a nation effectively implementing democratic socialism. And rather than embracing democratic socialism, all of the nations that embraced collectivism in the first half of the 20th century, including Russia and Germany, adopted what Orwell referred to as oligarchic collectivism. A totalitarian regime known as oligarchy collectivism occurs when a select few elites use force and deceit to consolidate control under the pretense of collectivism. And the system at the center of 1984 is just this. Furthermore, Orwell was extremely concerned that this despotic and oligarchic regime would take over the globe. One of Orwell's most well-known works, The Revolt of the Beasts, is a massive satire on the Soviet Union during the Stalinist era that was written when he realized the atrocities of Stalin's dictatorship. Orwell distilled his defense of democratic socialism into a line from 1984. Yet anytime the concept of an egalitarian, centralized society materialized in practice, it devolved into a dictatorship that concentrated power in the hands of a select few or just one. As soon as earthly paradise became feasible, it was discredited. The final book that Orwell wrote was 1984. At the age of 46, he passed away in 1950, less than a year after it was released. He seems to have waited to complete it before passing away. However, Viktor Frankl's concept of the desire to meaning might help to understand this. You can endure nearly anything if you have something to aim for. The author Goethe had a similar fate. He passed away soon after penning Faust, one of the best poems ever written. Last but not least, the Orwellian phrase was coined from George Orwell's writings. This term describes situations where a centralized political power undermines the happiness and well-being of the populace, but not because of the totalitarian regime per se, but rather because of the way that language and the media are used to manipulate information in order to support a particular hegemonic power. To put it another way, any side of a disagreement might accuse the other of manipulation by using the term Orwellian. Since many people view 1984 as a critique of socialism, the term itself may be used against Orwellian. However, George Orwell was a socialist, as I mentioned. It is Orwellian in and of itself to call Orwell a capitalist in order to make 1984 seem like a criticism of socialism. In the book, he urges readers to see how relativism based on beliefs and, more importantly, information manipulation are progressively obscuring the world's objective reality. And he asserts that political party has no bearing on this. Remember that the axioms are true. The rules of the solid world remain constant. Rocks are hard, water is moist, and items that lack a footing descend toward the Earth's center. The right to assert that 2 + 2 = 4 is freedom. Everything else follows if this is acknowledged. The core component of the dictatorial authority outlined in the book was the party's deliberate sowing of widespread confusion and its rejection of objective truth. Or you learn slowly, as Orwell puts it. How can I stay away from it? So what's in front of me? How can I avoid noticing it? Sometimes 2 and 2 are 4, sometimes they are 3, and sometimes they are all of them at once. Maintaining your sanity is difficult. Therefore, you must put in more effort. By returning to your awareness as an individual, seeing yourself as an individual and attempting to determine which beliefs are your own and which are stolen from others through a conscience inquiry, you may always escape the condition of mass psychosis. The protagonist of the novel, Winston, starts to believe, at least temporarily, that something is amiss, despite the opinions of others around him.
Despite being placed in every situation that might have caused him to abandon his intuition, he persisted in his belief. Being a minority, even if it was just one person, did not make you insane. Both truth and falsehood existed. Furthermore, you weren't insane if you stood by the truth against the opposition of the entire world. Until the next time, remember to subscribe to the channel and like the video.